Well, hello there, Pacer Nation, and welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast, Setting the Pace. And I'm joined today by Michael J. Facci. He is back, ladies and gentlemen. Facci, how was your weekend off? I know that you texted me on Sunday night and said, I'm in bed and it's 9:15. This feels great.
Oh yeah. Hey, look, anytime Sundays is something that I feel we always record on
Yeah.
Sunday. To have a Sunday off, it was good. I woke up for the gym this morning. I was refreshed. I got great hours of sleep in. I'm feeling good.
Facci, you had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. You had a 4-day weekend from the podcast.
Yeah, that I did. And you know what? Hey, it's good in the late end of July when not much is going on to be able to have a little bit of extra time to hang with the family, hang with some friends. I don't think they even saw any friends. I just basically just refreshed. All right, and you know what?
You played a lot of little basketball with Maddie. I saw that.
I had put up. I'm officially that parent putting up a sports highlight package of my 2-year-old hitting a ball off of a tee, shooting a ball into a hoop, and throwing a ball. We are trying to breed top tier athletes here in the Facci household. So, hey, little Maddie, she got the whole. We're doing baseball, we're doing basketball, we're going for it all.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into our conversation today with Caitlyn Cooper, there was some pretty big news that we saw today on social media. That is the superstar of the Indiana Pacers, Tyrese Haliburton. The man is on a scooter and he's got a boot on, but he still found a way to get on one knee and propose to the love of his life, Jade Jones. Congratulations to Tyrese on his engagement to Jade. And I believe Scott Agnes said that she was a cheerleader at Iowa State, and that is where they met their freshman year. So congratulations to them. I feel like they have now become not only the first lady of the Indiana Pacers, or the first lady she is of the Indiana Pacers, and Tyrese is kind of like the mayor, the president, whatever you want to call it. But going to Iowa and doing this, I feel like they're kind of taking over Iowa. They've already got property over in Milwaukee or Wisconsin. And let's talk about New York. I mean, Tyrese pretty much owns Madison Square Garden. So they got 4 states that they're pretty much in control of.
I'm very happy for them, and it was actually my wife that broke that news to me. I was in a meeting and she sent it to me on Instagram, and I was like, "It's about time." I was like, come on, we all knew like Jade is a rider for Tyrese. Like she is. Like I don't think anyone can say anything bad about her. Tyrese, we all knew, hey, he's got the one right there. It's only a matter of time before they make it official. Long time, and I'm really happy for the both of them. I one time sat in the same row as Jade, and she couldn't have been a nicer person.
Yeah.
For me to just be some guy in there, I made like some comment in there like, hey, I don't know, some stupid comment at the time.
I am not surprised at what you said was a stupid comment.
I had to say something. I made some comment, and she could not have been nicer in the situation. And I was like, all right, yep, she's the one for Tyrese. Tyrese, you officially got my stamp of approval. I know you didn't need it, but marry that girl. And
okay. Yeah. What did you think about the High School Musical 3 song choice?
I didn't have the volume on. I was in a meeting, so I just kind of had to scroll and be like, "Oh, wow."
Do you ever have the volume on?
I never really do. I'm not one of those guys that's like scrolling with the volume on and this So I saw it. I love the background. I thought Iowa State's something very special to them. So
yeah,
pretty cool. Obviously, my wife was like, "Oh my God, look at that ring!" I said, "You make Tyrese money. You better have a nice ring." All right. So it's one of those where. Hey, it's a great time for the soon to be Haliburtons.
Yeah, for sure. And I will just say this: if you ever see Jade at another game, especially this year, if she's at a game for some reason, if you tell her that diamond in the Huff joke,
oh, I might.
Oh God,
I might.
She is too nice to laugh at you, but she should laugh at you for that.
I will get a chuckle. All right, so. That'll be nice. And you know what? Hey, you never know. We were like there's like 2 people between us in the row. I was like, hey, this was just meant to be. I was like,
but just call her out.
Did I call her out? I wasn't.
How did you say anything to her? I'm curious about this story now.
I had to walk by.
Okay.
And so I obviously I've seen her face before. Instagram. Tyrese
yeah.
So I said something along the lines of like, I'm not even gonna get into it. It was just something.
What'd you say? This is good stuff. This is good content.
Like an icebreaker. Like, hey, like, we're really lucky to have your boyfriend here. We love him. So something really stupid. She was like, oh, hey, yeah, thanks. And I was like, hey, one time he came on, my co-host and I, our show.
Oh my
Could have been
God.
nicer this time. I said something like his agent said he had 10 minutes, and Tyrese was like, don't worry about that. Like, I'll give you an hour.
Told her the whole thing.
I told it to her. Yeah, I told her she could not have been nicer. So, yeah.
It's really nice to have your boyfriend on the team.
Yeah, I'm telling you, as I said, it was something really stupid. It really was like as cheesy as could be. Like, all right, I'm gonna say something, and I'm gonna keep it moving.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna go, get some food.
Why don't you just say, "Hey, Jade, nice to see you"?
I would have been like, "Who are you?" Like, like what? Like
that's what I do every time I see her at the arena.
Yeah,
I say, "Hey, how are you?"
Nah, I made it. A little bit more personable. But yeah,
hey, your boyfriend was on our podcast. They gave us 10 minutes. He gave us an hour.
I said something along the lines of that. And she was probably like, that sounds like my boyfriend. What a guy.
That's my guy, Ty. Yeah, for sure. No, anyway, that was great stuff. Thank you for sharing that. I know you were a little bit nervous because you never know which way I'm going to take it, but
yeah, I knew.
You give us great stuff, Facci. You are a character, man.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't think you're real. I really, if I didn't never meet you, I would not know if you're real. I will say Michael Scotto did join us on our last episode. If you guys have not checked that out, please do. I did tell Michael Scotto, when you can't have Michael Facci, you got to upgrade and get a better Michael. Michael Scotto is that guy. And he said that he could fill your shoes because he's a size 11. And I said, you're probably a size 9, size 10.
That is so false. I'm a 10 and a half, 11, depending on the make of the shoe.
Okay.
All right. So I do own shoes that are 11s. I do own shoes that are 10 and a halves. But I mean, you might be a lot taller than me. But to throw out a 9, I mean, I would have to be like 5'7" or 5'6".
What are you?
Sorry. I am very close to 5'10", depending on what you're using to measure it. My driver's license says 5'10".
That is you don't have to get measured for that. You just tell them.
It says
so
5.
You're lying. Okay.
I don't know. It says 5'10".
Is it with the poofy hair or with your hair flat?
My hat to be flat. I would have to have. I'd have. This is
what I'm saying. You got the little poofy in your hair, so do you add that?
I don't have. I don't have like a Jared Allen like fro.
No, but like you got it like combed up. It's not like it's flat.
It didn't squish my hair down when I was measured or anything like that.
All right,
5'10".
Okay, well, you and Scotto wear the same shoe size, so that's nice.
Yeah.
So fit him perfectly. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and take a quick commercial break. When we come back, the great Caitlyn Cooper gives us a little state of the Pacers here, her thoughts on this team going into next season, and what she thinks from a lot of different players. So you guys are going to enjoy her analysis as always. So we'll be right back after this. All right, everybody joining us now on Setting the Pace. She is a reoccurring guest, and we haven't had her on in a while. I've had people say, hey, you guys should get Caitlyn Cooper on the podcast, and I'm like, have you not listened to Setting the Pace before? She's been on here several times. We've done different drafts. I mean, we've had a lot of fun, but Caitlyn Cooper is back. Caitlyn, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back. I think it's funny that people said that they wanted me to be back on here because I've had people saying that we need to have a roundtable, that somehow you guys and me and Tony need to converge.
Hey, Tony's coming on tomorrow.
Podcast. So then you've done it. You've accomplished what's been asked.
I know. We need to do it. Like Avengers Assemble or something. Maybe get Samson to join us as well. Like I think that would be fun. We could figure something out. I wouldn't mind playing host and kind of letting you guys just share all the good information, but it would be a blast. But anyway, Caitlyn, we appreciate you coming back on. And obviously, Pacers had an incredible run, Game 7 of the NBA Finals, where they lose a close game, and it might have been a lot different if Tyrese Haliburton was healthy. But I guess just to kind of start off with this season and just kind of review it, and before we move on to next year, what was maybe your biggest takeaway from like the biggest change the Pacers made from the prior year to this year's playoff run?
Definitely the defense and the adjustments that they made to the defense. I think more than anything, what I've learned about that coaching staff and the players involved is just how much it was a living organism. It was a living organism throughout the second half of the season, but certainly throughout the playoffs, how many tweaks they made. I mean, even if you just look at that Oklahoma City series, they start out nexting against Shea. They pull that back because Oklahoma City's cutting against it. They're applying a lot of pressure. They're having Andrew be very aggressive in that regard. And then the big change that really shifted things in Game 6 by completely taking that pressure back and kind of catching the Thunder by surprise with that. Just a lot of different tiny adjustments that I won't get into from a very nitty gritty X's and O's perspective, but the defense was certainly what took them to the next level. And I think that there was, at the beginning of the season, if you're looking back at that really lovely stretch where they had the losses to Brooklyn and Toronto and Charlotte before they got to that in-season tournament break, I was more concerned about the offense than I was the defense. And I remember, I think that was the last time that the three of us podcasted, because I was like, what exactly has occurred? What's causing the offense to suddenly have regressed to this point in time? And I had lower expectations for the defense. As it turns out, when they fixed the offense itself in some ways helped fix their defense. As we know, the fact that they were a low turnover team really aided their defensive efforts. Just taking better shots, making more shots. And I think a lot of that connected to something that a lot of people weren't talking about at the beginning of the season, which none of us really could talk publicly about at the beginning of the season because the Pacers weren't referencing it. But Tyrese Haliburton getting healthy, I think, made a pretty big difference. Aaron and Andrew getting healthy, I think, made a pretty big difference. So I think my main takeaway from just what that season was is the many adjustments that they made, the fact that several players got better individually defensively, and that the coaching staff was very amenable with what they were doing on that end of the floor as well.
Now it went from 2 seasons ago to, hey, not really knowing what to expect. Could you be a play-in, playoff team, to now back-to-back years of just, overachieving. The conference finals run where we came up, we got swept against Boston, the NBA finals run where you go to game 7. Does it feel like now this team is just, set on, like, they have to win? If you have a healthy Tyrese Haliburton, you have to go for it. There can't be times in between where you're just happy to be there like the Pacers of the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key words there are if you have a healthy Tyrese Haliburton, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, I think in a way, it's going to sound probably overly optimistic, and I don't know how you guys feel, but I almost feel like next season is going to be win-win either way. Because if they surprise everybody and they get into the play-in tournament or they make the playoffs outright, then that's going to mean that somebody on the roster made a pretty big leap.
Yep.
And I think, like, some people might be thinking, it'd be better for them to get a lottery pick in a year when Tyrese is out, but it's like, if somebody on that roster makes a big enough step forward that they're a solid playoff team, then you feel really good about what's going to happen when Tyrese comes back. And if they don't, then they are getting a lottery pick. So I think it's kind of win-win either way, given what the sad and unfortunate circumstances are in a way.
Yeah, next year is going to be interesting. And I think this is a great way to kind of pivot into that, because not really sure what's going to take place in terms of like overall win-loss record, but we know we're going to be playing a different style without Tyrese. When you look at Andrew Nemhard, this is someone that I know you are a huge fan of. I thought it was a great point you brought up too on your podcast, was just talking about how he can't do what he did defensively this year with such a heavy load offensively. But what kind of are your expectations for Andrew coming into next season?
I think the biggest question that I have for him and that I have on the season as a whole is who is the Andrew Nemhard for Andrew Nemhard? Like, Tyrese benefited last year certainly from the fact that they had Andrew Nemhard to apply 50 feet of pressure, take up on the opposing team's best perimeter player, and be there and available as a secondary ball handler. If Tyrese is getting face guarded the whole series against the Cleveland Cavaliers, Andrew Nemhard ran more pick and roll in that series than Tyrese did. He effectively was the Pacers' point guard. Now, in the reverse, Andrew definitely benefited from Tyrese as well. Like, when Andrew's running all that pick and roll, he's getting to do it 4-on-4. He and Miles were one of the best pick and roll combinations in the NBA during that series. So when I'm looking at what expectations I have for Andrew, it's not so much having any doubt about what he's capable of doing and what his guile is as a pick and roll operator. It's more so I look at game 5 against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I remember how exhausted he looked by the fourth quarter and how much I think that played a really big factor in why the Pacers made the adjustment when they made it in game 6 to pull that pressure back and redistribute it so that they weren't asking Andrew to be picking up the full length of the floor, but then they were doing a lot more doubling in the half court against Shea and Jalen Williams. And certainly, like, I don't think that's an adjustment the Thunder were expecting, and they got the benefit of the element of surprise from that, but also it helped them to preserve Andrew Nemhard, because I think they were anticipating that, like, hey, Tyrese was limited after that. We're going to need more from him. And I'm just wondering, like, certainly every game is not going to be game 6 of the NBA Finals against the Oklahoma City Thunder, but what can the Pacers do to ensure that every game next season isn't game 6 against the Oklahoma City Thunder? And which side do they have a better chance of alleviating for Andrew? Do they have more guys that they could potentially throw at the point of attack so he's not having to do that as often and he can really focus on being that primary lead initiator for an entire season without Tyrese's gravity? Or do they say, no, we think that the temperature of Nemhard is that important. We need to continue to have you be the person that's spearheading and the figurehead of the defense, especially now that we don't have Miles Turner behind you anymore. And then it becomes, we need to find somebody on the roster and develop them into the secondary ball handler that could potentially alleviate some of that from you. I think it's just going to be a tremendous ask. I've racked my brain. Samson and I talked about it on the podcast at the end of the season. I can't think of another guy who's going to get asked to do that much in the entire NBA. Somebody who is a lead initiator, is guarding the other team's best player, and not only guarding the other team's best player, but doing it the full length of the floor. So one way or another, the Pacers are going to have to make an adjustment to what they're doing for him to get the best out of him, I think, just based on what I saw in the playoffs.
You talked about him having to do a lot. Well, one of our listeners sent Alex and I a message in the group chat, and I didn't realize it at the time, but Andrew Nemhard had the very best odds for most improved player of the year. Do you think that given he's going to play such a big role for the Pacers, that winning most improved is something that could be in the cards for next year?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think he's just going to have that much more of the ball. Because another thing that we didn't talk about is last year, the Pacers played a lot of minutes with 2 point guards on the floor. Most of the time, look at their rotation. It was Tyrese and Andrew starting together, then Tyrese and TJ finishing a quarter, then TJ and Andrew, then Tyrese and Andrew. Like it was very little amount of time that Tyrese himself was ever on the floor without another point guard out there. Now the Pacers are probably going to have to do some of that because they don't have a third string point guard technically right now on the roster on their standard 15. So if it's going to be a lot of like Andrew and TJ tag teaming it, that means Andrew's going to have even more of the ball. So, I think that there's a great opportunity in front of him in that regard. And I think that also he's more, in the line of view after the playoffs that he just had, where people are probably going to be paying a little bit more attention to him because of some of the standout moments that he had throughout all 4 series. So I think that's definitely in line for him for sure.
I've heard Chad Buchanan now say that they think Johnny Furphy can kind of play the Ben Shepard role, but maybe do a little bit better, like 2 different times now on different interviews. Do you see the same things with Johnny Furphy? And I know it's kind of early to tell that, but are you a little surprised that they've kind of openly said that about, Johnny Furphy kind of playing the Ben Shepard role?
They function similarly within the offense, and the way that they both defend is similar. Johnny and Jarus are like polar opposites of each other. I do not see Johnny Furphy as a 2 guard. When ESPN had that on their depth chart, I was like, Johnny Furphy is a backup shooting guard. I don't know that you want him standing opposite of Andrew or TJ and like catching the ball to go into a secondary pick and roll. You probably don't want a lot of that. And in that way, what is it being asked of Ben Shepard within the offense in terms of being a wheel greaser, helping get between options? You're hoping he can make some spot up threes from above the break better than to what he's done at this point in his career. Johnny has more verve as a driver right now than Ben Shepard does. He gets more paint touches. What he does once he gets into the paint can be somewhat questionable, I think, at this point in time. But I like Johnny Furphy a lot. I that was another thing that we talked about at the end of our podcast. I told Samson, because he was going out to Vegas to watch some of the games, I was like, you'll notice him. Like he has some juice. Like I think that he could be in the rotation next year. I don't know that it would necessarily be right at the 2 guard spot, but in terms of one definite edge that I think he has over Ben Shepard right now is that they both play contain defense. And it's pretty cool that Johnny Furphy is the height and the size that he is, and that he can get over the top of a screen. You can throw him out there against, Dennis Schroeder, other point of attack defenders that they were doing during that middle portion of the season when he was getting minutes. Ben Shepard is one of the best in the league at limiting blow by rate and getting over the top and staying skinny. The difference is his contests always don't always have that much effect. If he takes a bump, if it's a more physical guard, he doesn't have the same effect there as he does in actually keeping the ball out of the paint at times. Johnny has a lot more size in that regard to have a more impactful contest. So, and those aspects, yeah. And if you're just looking at like a 10-man rotation and who he would be most likely to potentially bump from the rotation, perhaps Ben Shepard, but I don't really view Johnny Furphy as a 2 guard, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, look, ESPN's going to put some crazy graphics out there from time to time where they might have Furphy in the 2 guard spot. But, when you're mentioning the 2 guard spot, guys, there's one name that you don't really hear that often, and I think it's a little bit loud not hearing it, and that's Bennedict Mathurin. We've heard KP say, quote, we're going to develop someone at the 2. We heard Chad Buchanan be non-committal on anything as it relates to Bennedict Mathurin being the starter, when it would seem that all signs would point to, hey, take on a bigger role. Tyrese Haliburton not going to be in the lineup this year. You would think that you would be shooing Mathern in. What does it really say that Mathern is not being named the starter, or even really getting that much of a vote of confidence as it relates to being the starting 2 guard?
Yeah, because they were a little bit more out there with it 2 seasons ago, right? When he overtook Buddy in the starting spot from the get-go. Like, it seemed very clear headed into that year that Ben and Obi Toppin were both going to be starters, although neither of them remained as starters. And then Ben was a starter for a time last year. And I think it just kind of proved out that Aaron was a better fifth starter than Mathern, and Mathern's a better sixth man than Aaron. Whether that remains to be true, given how much the team is potentially going to change, I think right off the top, when I was talking about before, like who is the Andrew Nemhard for Andrew Nemhard, I don't think that Ben readily fits either of those two things to alleviate stuff for Andrew right here, right now. But one game, 2-game series that I would go back and point to is that when Tyrese was out and Andrew was running point in Atlanta, when they played those back-to-back games, by the end of the second game, the Pacers put Mathern onto Trae Young because, like, you know what? It's a lot for Andrew to be guarded by Dyson Daniels, with Dyson Daniels ducking under everything and Andrew having to initiate everything and then also be guarding Trae Young full time. So Mathern had 30 points in that game, and Mathern was guarding Trae Young at the end. And the other benefit of it is that Andrew, in my opinion, is probably the best off-ball defender on the team too. So if you're switching a lot of screens with Ben up top, like they were between him and Pascal Siakam, then you're not quite as concerned with the screen navigation with Benedict Mathern. Andrew doesn't have to pick up the full length of the floor, and you're also gaining Andrew as a tagger against a highly creative playmaker in Trae Young. So when I look at that type of a matchup, I think, hey, maybe, like, let him stretch his legs. Let's see. I think at the end of the day, organizationally, it doesn't make sense if it isn't Mathern. Like, I can understand from a basketball standpoint that you could look at it and be like, if you want to give Andrew some of it a break defensively, like maybe you play Ben Shepard or Johnny Furphy for that exact reason, because of what type of defenders they are. And maybe if you're hoping to add a little bit more playmaking, maybe you go jumbo and it's Aaron at the 2 and it's Jarus Walker at the 3 along with Pascal and whichever center they pull out of the hat that ends up being the starting 5. I don't know, but I don't think it makes sense, and we'll see whether they reach agreement on an extension with Mathern or not. But in the event that they don't, like, I think he almost has to start, because what type of message will that send to the rest of the league if he doesn't? Like, if you're in a negotiation position where you would all think that you might want to trade Mathern and he's still coming off the bench when Tyrese isn't even available, because I think that we can mainly point to a big reason why Ben sometimes does need to be a sixth man is because he really hasn't meshed that well with the Tyrese style of basketball. If Tyrese isn't even there anymore and he's still coming off the bench, if I'm a league executive somewhere else, I'm thinking, oh, the Indiana Pacers view him topping out as a sixth man. Tyrese isn't even playing. I don't need to offer as much for him because they don't view him as a starter. So why should I? So I think at the beginning of the season, at the very least, that's what it needs to be, and they need to give it a look, just like they have 2 other times. They might rule it out. They might be like, yeah, that's not really working out. This isn't that complimentary to Andrew either. We need to make a change. But I would rather it go that way than potentially hamstringing yourself, which I understand he would still be a restricted free agent. But for optics' sake, I think that's where you need to start, even if that isn't necessarily where they finish.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to start him for multiple reasons. You're going to need scoring, especially without Tyrese and Miles in the lineup, and he can definitely do that. And if you do feel like he is a trade chip, it does increase his value probably if he is a starter versus coming off the bench. The only reason I can see why they wouldn't do it is because maybe they're trying to keep that new contract that he wants a little bit lower, because they can say, well, we don't view you as a starter. You're more of a bench guy. We'll pay you like a bench guy. That's the only thing I can see. But you bring up Aaron.
But do you think that's an interesting point, though? Because do you think of what you know of Benedict Mathern that he would agree to that? I think he seems like the ultimate bet on himself guy to me.
Oh, like, for sure.
I think he totally seems like a guy who would, and Mathern, if this isn't correct of you, then I apologize for reflecting you this way. But he definitely seems like somebody who would be like, I'm going to show that I'm worth it. Like, that he would believe in himself to do that. So
I mean, it kind of gives me Kuminga vibes a little bit, right? Just because,
I'm right there with you on that. I really do.
Kuminga, they're not the same player, but I think they both believe in themselves and think that they're, not in the right spot, or they're not being utilized the correct way. Like, I think Kuminga would welcome a change. I think Mathern would kind of welcome a change too, depending on how things go this year. But it's just a fascinating thing to watch, because I feel like the way this organization has handled the Mathern stuff, like, yeah, it makes sense because of the Haliburton fit, but I also this is your 6th overall pick. This is someone that you've invested a lot in terms of like draft equity. And if you're still kind of like hesitant to commit to him, like, what does that say to him moving forward? But I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time on it, because I feel like I've hammered a lot of that stuff already on this podcast. But I did want to talk to you about Aaron Nesmith, because this is a different role for him. And we talked about like who could probably, miss out on Haliburton being available the most. And he was one of the top guys we were talking about, is how Haliburton kind of helps create for him offensively. What are you maybe wanting to see from him offensively that might be different this year than what we've seen in the past couple of seasons?
It's funny that you should ask that, because somebody asked that exact question in my mailbag that comes out tomorrow. And something that stands out to me about it is he shot the three considerably better in this playoff run than he did in last year's playoff run. And when you really look and break down the numbers as to why that was, it was mainly that he made contested threes at a much higher rate. He shot like 44% on contested threes versus, I want to say, below 30 last year. And he didn't take a lot of contested threes last year, in part because he didn't really have the one dribble pull up in his bag. Like he's not great at using escape moves against closeouts to keep a three. He did improve at this year. He improved as a movement shooter this year, but he was making a high level of contested threes. So it wasn't really just him like feasting off of the wide open threes that Tyrese is known to create. So in the Knicks series, I wrote about it a little bit as a preview, that if you look at who Aaron's matchups were a year ago in the playoff run, it was Chris Middleton, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. Like, it was basically no one that he had a height advantage against. And this playoff run, it was like Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Gary Trent Jr. Like, it was a lot of guards. And the reason he was drawing those matchups is because Andrew was doing so much of the point guarding. Like, they weren't going to put Jalen Brunson onto Andrew Nemhard. They put Jalen Brunson onto Aaron Nesmith. So Aaron Nesmith went from setting one screen with Jalen Brunson guarding him during the regular season to 74 in the Eastern Conference Finals. So he had a height advantage. It was helpful to him when he was shooting contested threes because he could still release over the top. So when we're talking about Mathern, I know you said that you've talked this subject to death, but I actually do think that Mathern could be beneficial to Aaron in the starting lineup, because if Andrew and Mathern are both out there, teams probably aren't going to put, the Jalen Brunson or the Trae Young onto Mathern or to Nemhard. They're probably going to continue putting them on Aaron Nesmith. So Aaron Nesmith's still going to have the size to be shooting over the top of those guys. Whereas if it's Ben Shepard, if it's Johnny Furphy, if it's Jarus Walker, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's going to get the same matchup advantage that he had in this playoff run. So that's one thing that I look at with Mathern, and I'm like, that could be of help. And, some of it too, like another thing that I think Aaron will help Andrew out with is I think that it's possible when Andrew's a full-time starting point guard that teams are going to duck under a lot. If he doesn't up the volume of pull-up three attempts and he's the primary guy out there, I think that you're going to see that, just like what I referenced with Dyson Daniels. And the more that happens, it makes it more valuable to, potentially be using as Aaron as a screener against those weaker defenders and be popping him, blurring him out to three where those passing lanes to the screener will be pretty wide open. So, and those two specific aspects, that's kind of what I'm looking for from Aaron. So, if he is guarding the weaker assignments, you want to see a little bit more creation other than just like, attacking straight out of the closeouts. And will he be willing to do that? Because I do think it's going to be more necessary.
Yeah, we've talked about some players developing. A name that you just brought up, Dyson Daniels, took him a few years and really exploded onto the scenes, had a really good year in a change of scenery. One player that we're still waiting to kind of explode onto the scene or take on a bigger role is Jarus Walker. You just mentioned him. What in a year where you say it could be a win-win depending on how the Pacers, finish the season, a big part of that, considering a win, would be the development of Jarus Walker. What do you think Jarus could be looking at going into year 3?
It's funny because when you look back at last season, I felt like the turning point for him was after they won that bench game against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And he didn't even basically play in overtime because he was really bad. Like at the end of the fourth quarter and the beginning of the overtime, he had a rough game in that one, picking up fouls. Like they moved him from Anthony Edwards. They had the double when he was guarding Anthony Edwards. Then they put him onto Julius Randle. Then he got into foul trouble there, and then he limped off, and he didn't end up playing the rest due to injury. But from that point forward on, I thought he started trending upwards. I thought some of the defense started getting more disciplined from him. I thought the motor stuff had corrected itself to an extent. Obviously, the shot came around in a really big way. That was for the majority of last season, though, as well. Like I've talked about it before, but when he was a rookie at Summer League, he had 2 hitches in his shot, and that corrected pretty quickly. Basically became a laser toward the back end of the season. But as far as like his overall development and what I would still want to see from him is there's still some of the motor stuff. Like there's still some times where it's like, I'm not sure that your player should have just got 3 rebounds in a row on the same possession. Or like if you do have a turnover, because he can be kind of casual, then he just stands there and doesn't get back, like those types of things. And that's a very low hanging fruit. But in terms of like an actual thing that the finishing needs to get better. The finishing in the half court in particular needs to get better if he's attacking a closeout, and he might see more closeouts if he continues to shoot the ball in the way that he is. And for him, it's not even so much about the touch, it's more about the footwork. He doesn't use the soles of his feet. He tiptoes a lot, and that's like a biomechanic thing. So we'll see how that goes over the summer, because in Jarus's defense, I don't really think that's going to be something that you correct in season. That's going to have to be something that's in the gym, taking time to kind of correct what the footwork is so that he has a lot more balance when he gets to the rim. That's what leads to, more of the floater touch being necessary, more of the really wide angle. I've run out of real estate and now I'm not even hitting the box on the finish, versus getting all the way to the rim and being able to finish with more power. So that's kind of the number one trait that I'm looking for from him, because like I said, he's a very different defender than Johnny Furphy. He's more an event creator. He can be very ambitious, whereas Johnny's kind of the opposite of that, and he plays a lot more in contain. So in terms of like who I would rather see defending point of attack, if I want to have like a bigger defender out there, it would probably be Johnny, although Jarus certainly has very quick cat-like reflexes where he can poke the ball from behind at times. But I like Jarus more so stalking the nail, more so as a secondary rim protector, low man, and Johnny more as the guy that against certain matchups, because he won't be able to do it against every matchup. But like if I want somebody to keep the ball out of the paint, I'd rely on Johnny Furphy a little bit more in that specific aspect. So I think that's mainly what I'm looking for Jarus. But I thought he had a pretty strong finish to the season, to be honest. And I thought it was a major plus, especially given with regard to how much was going to be asked of Pascal in the Bucks series, that Jarus was getting minutes at all, and that he could get some of the reps against Giannis to take some of that load off of Pascal.
Yeah, I think Jarus is such a fascinating player, right? It's just, he's got the intangibles. He's got some of the stuff you want to see. It's not all there yet. I think it's part of just being a young player too, and changing positions from the 4 to the 3 does play a factor into that. But when Chad was on the podcast last week and he said that he wants to see him play with more force, it's like, this can't be a reoccurring thing if he wants to really be in the rotation on a consistent basis. And we talk about Ben Shepard maybe being the odd guy out for Furphy, but it could be Jarus if, Furphy ends up just playing with more force throughout the entirety of the season. But one guy I do want to talk about, Haliburton obviously is a guy that we know has a lot of pizzazz. He likes to be a little flashy, but there might be a new man on campus that wants to kind of take that role, and this guy hasn't seen a backwards dunk he doesn't like, and that is newly acquired center Jay Huff. What are your thoughts on Mr. Huff, and how do you think he's going to fit in here with this team?
I had to do a crush Jay Huff, because when they traded for him, I was like, sure. Like usually the Pacers make pretty good trades. This is a low risk move, but like I haven't seen a lot of him play. So usually the thing that I'll do with that is I like, especially with regard the Pacers just played the Thunder, I was like, I'm going to go watch the Grizzlies games against the Thunder, see what he did defensively. And the Grizzlies have like a completely different scheme than the one that the Pacers were running. So, anytime Isaiah Hartenstein had a touch against the break, he was literally stepping backward into the paint, into a very deep drop and playing a one-man zone. Whereas the Pacers had their bigs completely up, steering, those handoffs and really going into hard deny. And it's funny because when you look at those two different types of schemes, I think that the assumption would be looking at it that Jay Huff's is the more conservative scheme. Not that's the more intensive scheme for the other 4 players on the floor, because when you're going to play somebody back to the rim, for one, they can be more aggressive because they know that somebody's back there waiting at the rim, but also they have to. Like, you have to be applying maximum energy and effort at all times. You have to be in denial. You have to be top blocking, because if you don't, somebody like Isaiah Hartenstein can be setting up screening angles. You're giving him more vision, and then the guards can be playing downhill in rhythm all night. So I don't think the Pacers are automatically going to adopt that, because that was something that Memphis was even doing with Jaren Jackson Jr. But it is interesting in theory to think about that Jay Huff is somebody to this point in his career has had a much closer radius than the way that they were using. The Pacers were using their bigs much more up at the level last year. And if he's going to be a single pick and roll coverage big, again, what does that mean for Andrew Nemhard, Aaron Nesmith at the point of attack, and how many more versions of the defense might the Pacers need to take on? But I think overall, like, having another big, I think, matters for what alignments the Pacers can take. If you can catch as many lobs per 100 as Obi Toppin, that probably fits pretty well. If you can play in an up-tempo scheme, that probably fits pretty well. So I don't think that there's any harm done with acquiring Jay Huff, to be honest with you. I mean, they gave up a second rounder in a pick swap, so
I love the Jay Huff pick. I mean, trade. I really do. I just think it's like, you have nothing to lose. It's 3 years under contract at a little over $2 million per year. The upside's there. I think his defensive capabilities are there. Former G League Defensive Player of the Year, for whatever that's worth. We've seen guys win G League accolades and it not translate to the NBA, but I like the size that he has and the ability to stretch the floor. On the other side, you got Isaiah Jackson as a good compliment. I felt like also another really good defender who at least had some balance before, maybe very well still does. How do you feel about the center rotation right now? Center by committee seems to be the popular term. As we look to replace a Miles Turner, it's going to be 3 or 4 guys trying to make up maybe what one guy used to do last year.
I mean, and I think that's the key point, right? Because you're really going to have to, and Rick's been great at this, but I think you're really going to have to be trusting him to press the right buttons at the right time and find the right types of combinations, because they are going to offer such vastly different things. I think from what I've seen, I've largely sided with liking this offense with the spacing bigs a little bit more, just because I really like in the modern NBA, like putting a guard in the dunker spot so that the guard has to protect the rim rather than a big. It's not even so much about like, oh, the pick and pop stretches the defense, because oftentimes, more often than not, the big doesn't actually go out and follow the big there. It's more about like what spots on the floor can they occupy. So that's probably why I lean a little bit more heavily towards Jay Huff. Although after what we just watched with Miles against the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Thunder weren't going to react to that shooting. They were going to load up at the blocks and the elbows no matter what. And the thing that really would have helped Tyrese was the handoff craft and the screening craft, which really just wasn't there. They needed somebody to carve out angles for him to be able to get into the paint, and that wasn't necessarily happening. So, between James Wiseman gives you a lot of size per position. I wasn't really sold on the James Wiseman experience, to be honest with you, based on what I saw in preseason last year. But, he was somebody who could catch the ball around the basket. He rebounded a little bit, and he does give you a lot more size. As you said, Isaiah gives you a little bit more pick and roll diversity. If you want to be able to, like, hey, let's go ahead and start Mathern. Let's have Isaiah out there. Let's just switch a little bit more, and then we don't have to worry about Mathern getting caught on a pick or not doing a veer switch, because it's a different type of coverage. And then everything that I just mentioned with Jay Huff. So for me right now, like, a lot of people have asked me, like who do you think is going to be the starter or whatever? I'm like, it's impossible to predict that, because I have no idea what Isaiah Jackson or James Wiseman look like. Isaiah Jackson looks bigger. That's really all that I can tell you. I don't know how that's going to translate to his game post Achilles. And I guess that's something interesting in and of itself. The Pacers have 3 players now coming off of a very significant injury. I'll be curious to see how that helps Tyrese. Like, having those guys around and seeing them back in a rotation and playing while he's going through that rehabilitation, or if they come back and they don't quite look like themselves, is it as helpful as you would think that it would be? Like, if he's looking and being like, oh, Isaiah doesn't quite look like Isaiah anymore. Like, I don't know. So I think that could be really beneficial to him, just getting, advice about what to expect from the process. But also, you're also looking in a mirror to an extent, although they play the basketball obviously very different and at different positions, but you see the point.
Just to touch on what you were saying about how OKC defended Miles. I mean, if you saw the way Miles was shooting from 3 in that series too, I mean, would you really guard him either? Would you worry about it? I don't know. I'm just throwing shade at Miles for no reason, but I just enjoy doing that at this point right now where we're at. But it's going to be interesting. And I was going to ask you this, because we haven't really talked a lot about Obi Toppin and his upcoming role this year, because obviously he could lose some of his bright spots without Tyrese being there, but I still think he's got value. But what kind of are you expecting from him? And do you think that he closes more games as that, second big out there next to Pascal throughout this season? Or do you think maybe some of these centers by committee end up getting the nod over him? Because I feel like Rick might lean a little bit more Obi Toppin to close games out this year with.
That's an interesting one, right? Because I think that there was somebody, I don't remember who it was, who had a tweet, and they're like, you can't play double big in today's NBA. Like, you have to be able to do that in a spurt. And I was like, but do you? Because, like, the Pacers won the minutes against Brook Lopez and Giannis handedly. They won the minutes against Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. They won the minutes against Mitchell Robinson. No, I think they exactly broke even in the minutes against Mitchell Robinson and Karl-Anthony Towns. And they were slightly negative against Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein, but it was OKC didn't play them that much. I mean, from the beginning of the series, they weren't starting them. And as it was for the Pacers, I think, I don't have the number in front of me, but it was very nearly, or it was just below that they played more in the finals and close with Obi Toppin at the 5 than they did with Miles Turner. So the Pacers not only didn't have a double big lineup, oftentimes they were going small in a lot of clutch situations throughout that playoff run. So I think it's entirely possible that Obi might still be out there just for them to juice the offense a little bit more. And if they want to be like, we still want to play with pace, we want to have the spacing because we don't really want to put James Wiseman or Isaiah Jackson in the dunker spot and have the big around the rim for Andrew, especially because we gotta remember there could be other spacing concerns. It's kind of an interesting thought experiment to ask which are they going to miss more, Tyrese's playmaking or Tyrese's shooting? He's very, very good at both. Mm-hmm. I think he's a better playmaker than he is a shooter overall, but given that he was a person who was literally being face guarded the full length of the basketball court and enabling the other 4 players on the court to play 4-on-4, there's going to be more cramped spacing before you add in the fact that you could potentially have a big tethered pretty close to the basket on a lot of possessions. So, and that, for that reason alone, I think that you could still see some Obi Toppin at the 5. And I don't know, I don't have the numbers in front of me to know how many minutes Obi totally played with Tyrese versus didn't, but I think that his chemistry with TJ McConnell is still pretty good. Mm-hmm. TJ can still, enable that type of free-flowing, fast-paced style to be able to continue to see the strong things that Obi does. Although I will point out and say that at the beginning of the year, when they weren't playing at that pace, they were not winning the minutes with Obi Toppin on the court, especially because he didn't start out shooting the ball particularly well. If he's not getting at least a basket or 2 in transition and making a 3, then you don't like the Obi Toppin experience quite as much. So we'll see if they're able to mimic that style.
When he gets hot from 3, that man is scorching. And I think that there's times where it comes in bunches where all of a sudden he's, has 5 threes one night, maybe another night it's a little bit colder. But I think that for being not just an all-star, but for being our all-star, the man never gets talked about enough. That's Pascal Siakam. In a season where there's no Tyrese Haliburton, can Indiana lean more on Pascal Siakam? And do we think that he can maybe take his game, not to say to the next level, but, last year he was as consistent as it gets, but does he have another level without Haliburton that we feel that he can consistently bring to the Pacers, or is it going to be more of a collective effort? He's got to be good, but everyone else needs to up their game.
He's like the ultimate skeleton key. And I think what he added last season should make that a little bit easier, because now the fact that he has the 3 in his back pocket, if the Pacers want to use him as a driver more, because they don't use him as a driver near as much as what the Toronto Raptors did. They don't do as much inverted stuff with him as the Toronto Raptors did, although they saw a little bit more of that in the playoffs, depending upon the matchup. If they want to do more Pascal initiation, it's going to be easier for him now that he's making the 3. And he was already very good at that. Let's be honest, he already has experience playing out of a broom closet because he did it for how long in lineups that involved, he was playing in a lineup with Dennis Schroeder and Jakob Poeltl and Scotty Barnes. So if he can, I've compared him in the past that his game is a lot like sliding a piece of paper through a crack in the door. He's capable of doing these things. He just hasn't had to, because he's been the skeleton key to open it up and walk right through. The Pacers haven't needed him to be that, but he can be that. So I don't have a lot of concerns about Pascal other than the fact that, going back to what I said earlier, that this is kind of win-win. If they make the playoffs, that's going to be because Mathern or Nemhard or somebody had a really fantastic season and you're pretty happy with that. And if they don't, then they're getting a lottery pick. I think that there's going to have to be a balance with Pascal with that regard and assessing what is this season about? Where are we at? How good do we think that we are? Because I don't think you want him racking up tons of usage and mileage on his max contract in a season where you're not projected necessarily to be going back to the NBA Finals. And that's not a decision that you have to make on day 1 of the NBA season. You can certainly take your time and assess that. But I would hope that if it looks like, this just isn't going to be our year, maybe there's other injuries, or maybe something isn't clicking the way that we want it to, that it's not like Siakam's having 28% usage and he's averaging over 35 minutes a night. And it's like Nick Nurse basketball 2.0, where he's taking on tons and tons of wear and tear on a road to not necessarily getting anywhere. Now, if it looks like what TJ McConnell's writing, that they still want to get back to that feeling and they surprise everybody and they're super competitive, you're not going to take that away from Pascal. You're going to allow them to do that. But I think that they're going to have to keep a watchful eye on that.
When you look at this roster, with or without Tyrese Haliburton, obviously we know he won't play this upcoming season, but assuming he comes back healthy and you have pretty much the same roster for the 2026, 2027 season, what do you think is the biggest area of concern the Pacers still need to kind of address to make this, once again, a team that can get back to the NBA Finals?
In the long term after this season?
Yeah. You can even say for this season too, if there's an area that they need to address. Obviously, you're not going to replace Tyrese, but I'm just saying with Tyrese coming back, obviously no Miles, but still, you talked about you already kind of had like process moving on from him anyway. Like what area or what's their biggest weakness that you think they need to address?
Well, let's look at it both ways. Without Tyrese, like just a small scale move, I think that they still need to add a veteran point guard at some point in time. And I don't really like the options that are out there right now, if I'm being honest, in terms of the free agent crop. And I like Quentin and Ray J and Cam Jones. I think, though, that all three of them have reasons why you probably wouldn't permanently pencil them in as your third string point guard right now here today. So I think on a small scale move, that's still something that would be on my radar, especially because of what I just said before. This is a team that very readily has been better with more point guards, not less, playing at the same time. So I think that that would be helpful for them. I think that they're still going to need shooting development from a couple different players on the court, especially because they're losing all of the volume from Tyrese. They're losing the gravity from Tyrese. Certainly the pull-up shooting for Andrew would be a massive development if that comes around on any degree of volume. Mathern's still pretty wired to catch and drive before he catch and shoots, making the right reads against closeouts, those types of things. They don't have a lot of guys, and some of it's by design because they really value getting into the paint and that being their first option, but they don't have a lot of quick trigger three-point shooters out there. In the long term, when Pascal comes back, like I'll be if I'm surprised, great. But I don't think that they have the long-term center option on the roster. And I think that, and I wrote this in the piece immediately after it was announced that Miles was going to Milwaukee, is that it's always been very clear the way that Tyrese enhanced Miles. It wasn't always super clear the way, especially offensively, that Miles enhanced Tyrese. So, especially in the later rounds of the playoffs of some of the things that we've already talked about. So, in that sense, that might be even more important because I don't know exactly what Tyrese is going to look like post Achilles injury. So, finding that big that I think is going to address things that actually make Tyrese's life easier and not just fully relying on, well, Tyrese can make magic with anybody at the 5 spot. I think that that is true, but I think that there needs to be some consideration in the reverse as well. So, I think that that's still an area that they're going to have to resolve. Although, like I said, if that turns out to be Jay Huff or Ijax or James Wiseman, then like heck yeah.
I would have loved to have seen Tyrese with Jay Huff and Isaiah Jackson this year because I really feel like we would have had a much better look as like, okay, what is the center position? It's going to be hard to judge them right now this year without Tyrese, but it remains to be seen. My last question for you, it's not even August yet, so our answer could drastically change by the time the season comes. But in years past, it's hard to factor Andrew Nemhard in as a rookie as to what he could be in the regular season. Really hard to factor in, Ben Shepard. We don't really know, hey, late pick guy who seemed to be a 4-year guy in college. What could he be in the regular season? Both players end up playing a lot, especially their rookie years. Cam Jones. So Summer League, first couple games, a little forgettable. Finished strong. What are your expectations for Cam Jones in his rookie year when you are trying to figure out some of the backup point guard?
I don't think he's a third string point guard right now.
Yeah.
He had the 20 and 10 against the Knicks in the Summer League game, but two things about him is he doesn't have a lot of burst and kick. I had somebody in scouting message me after they took Cam Jones, and they're like, in body shape and drive track and shooting motion, he's very similar to Lance Stevenson. And I think that that's true, but he's like 70% the athlete that Lance Stevenson was. And he doesn't have the same bully drive at the basket either. So he has tremendous footwork. He has really good touch. That will be helpful because he's going to have to be crafty to overcome what's currently a pretty erratic pull-up shot and what some of that burst is that isn't there. And some of that burst isn't there on the defensive end either. I didn't think the film was very kind to him at the defensive end of the floor at Summer League, although, like I said, a lot of times with rookies, that's kind of the thing, although that didn't really apply to Andrew Nemhard at Summer League as a rookie. But that's not really a fair standard either. That being said, I think he's extremely left-hand dominant, like really, really, really left-hand dominant. And some of the quirks and rhythms of his game are very predictable in being left-hand dominant. If a screen comes to his right, he's going to go to a sweeping, exaggerated right-left cross, and he's going to reject it. Like he's not going to use that pick. He goes to the spin move. If he has to drive right with more than 1 or 2 dribbles, it's going to be a spin back to his left to get to the lefty floater. Like those types of things, once the NBA sees that, they're going to be ready to sit on it. And you have to be able to you can't just be confined to that one side of the floor. And I'm sure people who are listening to that are going to be like, yeah, but TJ is super right hand dominant and he nashes to his right like most of the time. And Tyrese, like we've all seen him get weaked. I'm going to be like, okay, but the difference is when he gets weaked heavily to his left, the Pacers flip the action to the other side of the floor and start running double drags for him to get downhill to his left. He passes out of layups going to his left quite often, but he's capable of passing out of layups going to his left and being just as effective making a pass with his left as his right. So that's kind of the way that they're able to work around that, in addition to having sets that enable him to sometimes get back to his right. Cam doesn't have that right now. He doesn't have the same range of motion with his right arm to be making all those types of passes on the move. He actively avoids it. Like I said, if the screens are going to be there, he doesn't use them. He rejects them so that he can stay on the left side of the floor. That being said, as far as like the point guarding, he makes good playmaking reads with his left. He can have the pocket pass. He reads the tagger pretty well from outside the arc. He can get downhill and make the drop-off pass. Like he has a range of passes. It just most of it's limited to one side of the floor. So unless that changes or unless the pull-up shot comes around really quick, because that's another thing with Tyrese. Yes, he's right-hand dominant, but he can pull up from 3 to his left or pull up from 3 to his right. That's a way that he gets around as well, too, as in addition to stepping back in either direction. So I would be surprised if Cam Jones is in the rotation right away, unless there was like a lot of people who are out ahead of him. And that doesn't mean that I don't like him or that I don't understand the pick. I do. The Pacers are a team that likes low turnover guards. They're a paint to great team. He gets into the paint a lot. Like I said, good footwork, good touch, but there's some limiting factors in terms of his ability to play point guard right now, I think.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I will say I really enjoyed yours and Samson's 2-hour podcast on YouTube. I watched it all in one setting, so I did not break that one up. I was eager to listen. So the really
I was
good
expecting that most people would turn that into like 3 or 4 episodes.
Hey, I won't lie. I did turn the speed up to like 1.25, 1.5 because I can listen on a little faster speed just because I want to get the content in. But I will say you did reach out to me and Facci, a couple of weeks ago, I think, and you said I just got my henna lime chips.
That's right.
We did a draft. Facci brought that up. The henna lime tortilla chips is his go-to with his chips and salsa. Caitlyn agreed. I disagreed. I still kind of disagree with that. I like them by themselves, but it's a little bit too much for me. I think I'm just more of a plain chip kind of guy. But I have to ask, since we're closing things out here, Caitlyn, on the podcast, any like food takes you want to throw at us as we close this out? And no, I haven't been the nicey treat yet. I promise I'm going to go before the summer is over, and I will give you a review. I don't go up that way. I don't live up that way.
I should have set up a trip for everybody when we were all there in Indy. I
failed.
I didn't barely do anything the entire time I was there. I think I was either at the arena or I was at where Samson and I were staying. That was literally all we did. He did other stuff. I didn't really do other stuff, but
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess my food takes would be, I don't know if you saw, but I think that I'm going to cherish the picture of Pascal with Cookie Monster for the rest of time that he
I love that.
A top tier reaction photo. I do like cookies, but I have made, and I don't want to give away too much, but I have made a specialty popsicle, as I always do for the mailbag. And I've watched Princess Bride as Samson wished, and it's a Princess Bride themed popsicle.
Okay.
I can't say it was good, but I did make it.
Yeah. Hey. Got to roll the dice to find out what's good or not. So I respect you, trying something out there. And, I know you're a big popsicle person, so I got to get back on the popsicle grind. I'm actually, while we're talking ice cream, I'm actually on an Italian ice kick right now. I got my cherry Italian ices. It's been pretty good.
What is the preferred Italian ice flavor?
I think I'm just always stuck with cherry. So I was supposed to have the tooth removed recently. So my wife thought she'd be like doing me a favor with like a box of cherry Italian ices. Didn't get the tooth removed. Now I just got the Italian ices. So I just got way more than I can handle. So, I got to make my way through those. But that's kind of been, I guess, more of my go-to ice cream if we're talking, anything frozen.
I've never had a cherry Italian ice. There's a new Italian ice shop that just opened not that far from me. And it enticed me. Like anything that's frozen always entices me. But I've never had a cherry one. I've had lemon.
Yes.
But I think that's it.
Cherry is definitely the move. Alex, what's your experience with Italian ices?
Not a lot. I think the lemon's probably all I've ever had myself. I'm more of an ice cream guy, so don't get mad at me.
Okay. So you're like Samson, you're only going to eat it if it's a creamsicle.
That was pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, no, I'll eat popsicles. Like they're not bad. Like I've bought Outshine before. Like I think they're good. I think the one I had with you was the coconut one, but like I brought it back here like 5 minutes before we started, and that thing was like so melted by the time we started podcasting on the mailbag. It was terrible, but it's really tasty. You know, I will say the thing I try to go to more often is the Yasso bars, which is like Greek yogurt because it's lower in calorie. And so I try to eat those. It's like 100 calories for one. So it's a lot better than having a bowl of ice cream at night. Kind of fill the sweet craving. But the one I've been eating recently is like a peanut butter chocolate chip thing. So it's pretty good. And it's 100 calories. You just eat one. So just limitations, right? But that's kind of my thing. So I don't know if you guys like frozen Greek yogurt, but there's another option that's a little better.
I got no experience. I don't know when we'll get there, but maybe one of these days. I've stuck to the old stuff, whether it's an Italian ice or like a chocolate and vanilla swirl with some toppings on it. That's more. I haven't dipped into the Greek yet.
One of the worst thing that's happened to me in my recent days here, going back to Cookie Monster, is when a crumble cookie opened not that far from me. Somehow my life now revolves around Mondays and looking at what the cookies that are going to be offered that week is, which is just what I need.
Big crumble cookie fan, huh?
I mean, I think some of them are a bit overrated, but yeah, I still keep buying them. Like I go there and I'll be like, that's a new flavor. It might be good. And then I'll be like, well, I don't know that it was as good as I anticipated, but I still keep going back. Some of them are I had a mint chocolate one there that was
fire.
Notch, yeah.
Facci, you a big cookie guy?
Not really. I grew up on Oreos. That's not special, but that used to be like dinner for me when I was growing up. I had really bad eating habits, so I used to just grab a ton of Oreos. For me, I can't have them in the house. You can't have one. You can't have two. You have to have 8 to 10, and the next thing you know, you're like, I've gone way too far. So I don't have any cookies in my house because I know that I can't be trusted. So I haven't had like the specialty crumble cookies or anything like that you mentioned, but that sounds like cookies have come a long way from my time with Oreos.
The crumble cookie is interesting. I like crumble cookies. I just don't really seek them out. But if they're where I'm at or I'm around one and people want to go, I'm not going to be a party pooper, but I'm a big sugar cookie with icing. I just love icing on things. So, but I don't like icing on cake all the time. It depends on what kind of icing it is. Like I'm more of like a buttercream icing. I don't really like that fluffy fake stuff. That's kind of gross.
Oh no. I need icing on cake, but I'm not a fan of that type
that fake kind of taste.
Yeah.
It's gross. But give me some like real like buttercream or like a cream cheese icing. Now we're talking. But I mean, you don't get this big not eating good stuff. So I'm just saying, like, if I was eating Outshine popsicles every night versus ice cream or whatever, I probably wouldn't look as big as I do. But that's besides the point, YOLO, right? You only live once. But
got your 100-calorie Greek yogurt.
I'm trying.
Whatever it is, you're on the right path. All right.
I like watching Caitlyn's reactions to our comments because I'm not sure what she's thinking, but she's probably like, "What are these guys talking about? Why are we on this podcast closing this out like this?" But
probably a good
Samson and I have done like 20 minutes on Russian literature and eagles, mosquitoes, Princess Bride.
That's more.
There's a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with basketball over there.
Well, are you covering the Fever at all? Do you watch the Fever games?
No, like I usually try to get to one or two, and because the Pacer season was as long as it was, and then we went straight from that to the draft and straight from that to Summer League, I feel very out of the loop.
Yeah.
It would be wrong for me to claim that I have been entrenched in the fandom. I had hoped to be because the Fever are like a team where I feel like I can be a fan, but I have not seen many games.
Let me just tell you this. It might make you feel better about yourself or good about yourself. Tony Easton, we were doing a podcast last Sunday, and he said, "Hey, can we push back 30 minutes? I'm waiting on Caitlyn." He meant Caitlin Clark. And in my head, I immediately thought, oh, he's got to talk to Caitlin Cooper about something. So I know you say that she's the other Caitlyn, you're the original Caitlyn. That is how I view it in my head. I'm not being disrespectful to the legend of the WNBA, Caitlyn Clark. But when he said I got it, Caitlyn's talking, I was like, oh, Caitlyn's talking to Caitlyn Cooper. I didn't even think about Caitlyn Clark. So I told him that, and we started laughing. He's like, too many Caitlyns around here.
I had really hoped that when Caitlyn Clark came here that we would all accept that the way that I spell Caitlyn is the correct way to spell it, because we both spell it the same way, but it hasn't happened yet. I still have relatives who will text me and be like, hey, Caitlyn, and it'll have a Y, it'll have a K. Hasn't happened yet. I thought maybe that would emerge as the one true dominant spelling, but
I was gonna say, I think it was a little by little because I haven't thought about it in a long time. I'm used to your spelling and her spelling, and I think that I have now in my brain kind of flipped it as to like, oh, isn't that the usual? So if it's worth anything, my wife spells Amy Aimee. So it's really hard to run into another Amy like that. So my head has shifted to that compared to the AMY. So I think it happens little by little, but I'm with you with the C. That's kind of how I view it now.
It was a real disappointment for me when I was at a dressing room in Indy and they're like, what's your name? Because they want to write your name on the board. And it was with a K and a Y. Like, you're in Indy. You should know better.
That's a bad look for whoever wrote that.
It's a bad look for whoever wrote that. You should be fired immediately. No, but I do think that the C with Caitlyn, it does hit home for me a little bit more. I had an ex-girlfriend in high school named Caitlyn with a C, so I've always just embraced that, but I also went to school my whole life with a Caitlyn with a K. So it's like,
now we just
why can't we just have both? Why can't we have nice things, Caitlyn? I mean,
part of my trouble is because my sister's name starts with a K, and so everyone assumes that my parents wanted both of our names to be like, you know how parents will, they name all their kids with the same letter, and I'm like, that's not what happened.
You know, we almost did that. I'm Michael. My daughter's Maddie. There was talks of you naming our son with an M name. My wife.
What was the name going to be?
To be honest, for about 2 years, Miles was the number one contender. I can tell you, if we have another kid, that will not be happening anymore. That name has been soured.
But the grass will be greener wherever that kid goes.
You would think, but I've seen some pictures, and I don't want tumbleweeds associated with this guy in life. All right, so I think at this point we've lost out on the M's, and we're just a hodgepodge of first initials now. So.
I'm ready for Huff to be born next for you, Facci.
Oh, yeah.
I'm ready for it. We're just going to call him Huffy.
We'll see.
There's going to be a James.
Spelled with a C, but my son's name is Cam. We do have a Cam Jones now. So maybe it is a shift of the tide of just, hey, we went from potentially Miles to I sell it for Cam Jones. Don't know how much will be in the rotation. We'll see. But, that's what we got right now. And
he'll most likely write with his left hand.
Yeah, we'll find out. We'll find out. But hey, I think that's a perfect segue where, Caitlyn, we've kept you long enough. Please tell everybody where they can find some of your awesome content that you're always putting out, because you can't miss it.
My handle on X at C2_Cooper. My whatever handle on Blue Sky is my full name, Caitlyn May Cooper, spelled the same way as Caitlyn Clark. When you go there, the link to my Patreon, patreon.com/basketballshewrote, is where you'll find all of my work and all of my videos, and coming out very soon, perhaps already once you've listened to this is the July mailbag, which I have put a lot of time and effort into. That's next on the docket. So that will be releasing very soon.
Yeah, that'll be great stuff. We're excited to check that out. And then next time you're on, Caitlyn, we'll try to make sure we do some kind of draft just to kind of end the podcast a different way than just our random food conversation we just had. But always like doing a little bit of a fun segment with you that's not basketball related. So Caitlyn, thank you so much. And Pacer Nation, if you're not following Caitlyn, I don't know what you're doing. Give her a follow at C2_Cooper. And if you're not following this podcast, we're at Pacers Pod STP. Facci and I will be back tomorrow with Tony East from Forbes.com. So hopefully you guys will tune in for that one. And we'll talk to you all then.